Welcome to Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe. I'm joined now by Sierra Cummings, one of our top investigative reporters here at Atlanta News First Investigates. Hi, Sierra.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So today we're talking about a really troubling issue, and that is patients essentially walking out the door at the most vulnerable time in their lives. And there is, unfortunately, a body count to this phenomenon, and there are grieving families. Tell us more about the story.
Yeah, this story revolves around patients at a local hospital in Riverdale, Clayton County. It's called Southern Regional Medical Center. And we started looking into this a few years ago, actually. It's been about 2.5 years ago. And just pulling back the curtain here, I pay attention to missing persons reports. And we gotten a lot of missing persons reports from Clayton County Police Department, and they're called Maddie's Call there. And at some point I was like, well, it seems like they're going missing from this block, Upperdale Road. And seeing that repeat address, I was like, well, let me figure out what's located over there. And then I found out it was the hospital about 2.5 years ago. And so from that point on, I just wanted to see if, like, okay, anecdotally, am I in my head here? Are there really a significant amount of missing persons reports? Or is it just so happens that I'm like checking my email more often than ever before? And so I just started compiling the list of missing persons report, and through that, I was able to learn that these were actual patients who were triaged and in the facility, and in some cases, they were vulnerable patients being held on involuntary holds, and yet they were able to escape from the hospital according to these police reports. I wanted to figure out if this was a bigger issue. Was it a certain time of year? Was it just a one-off? What's going on here? And ultimately, we were able to do some deep dive through federal and state records to figure out this is a problem, and it goes back to staffing issues, it seems, and the facility being unsecured, allegedly, based off of these staffing issues. Unfortunately, the family of Darryl Fussell says all of this led to his death. So here is missing Darryl Fussell. What you're about to see are the final minutes of Darryl Lynn Fussell's life.
You call us?
Riverdale police respond to a call for suspicious person. A man walked inside a facility undergoing renovation.
We're not sure what he did, bro.
Darryl kneeling on the ground.
You got that tool, and he started hitting himself on his head.
23-year-old never speaks.
Hey, boss man, Riverdale PD, what's going on? Hey, Riverdale PD, what's going on?
Hey, man, you need to talk to us.
Green shirt, black pants, what's going on?
Darryl gets up, grabs scissors from the nearby toolbox.
Hey, stay away from that.
Despite commands,
Stay away from that! Hey, hey!
he walks toward the officer with it.
2744, shots fired, signal 63, one male down.
Darryl's last seconds spent dying on the floor.
I don't got a first aid kit. I don't got anything to do.
The lieutenant seen here later retired. The officer who fired the weapon later took a new job. Riverdale police found the shooting justified with no policy violations. The Clayton County DA agreed.
Stay away from that!
There was no criminal wrongdoing.
If Darryl Lynn had never eloped from the hospital.
Yeah.
He never would have encountered that police officer.
Exactly.
Just hours earlier, Darryl was on an involuntary hold at Southern Regional Medical Center. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, he was a 1013 patient, a status which allows detainment of an individual in crisis who is posing a danger to themselves or others. Yet, police records describe Darryl managed to run past the nurse watching him and escape the hospital.
He wanted to get better. We trusted the system to help us with our son. When we were told to take him to the hospital, we took him to the hospital. When you do everything right, and the system still fails you.
And nobody wants to be accountable.
An aspiring music engineer. His family considered him remarkable from day one. He was one of the last babies born in 1999, ahead of the new millennium. So his birth
It was absolutely amazing.
covered on the news. Now his death covered on it too.
Identified by the GBI as 23-year-old Darryl Fussell.
I said, well, he came in on the news and he went out on the news.
Hey, boss man, Riverdale PD, what's going on?
Darryl's April 2023 death was not the first time a vulnerable patient escaped Southern Regional Medical.
Mental health crisis shouldn't be a death sentence.
In the last 3 years, 44 patients ran away. At least 28 were psychiatric patients on involuntary holds. Federal records provide some insight illustrating a history of federal policy violations. Like an investigation last year said, a patient found unresponsive in the psych area ultimately died. There was only one working registered nurse at the time. As a result, inspectors deemed Southern Regional in immediate jeopardy, a determination given when a facility's non-compliance has or could cause serious harm or death. It makes a hospital potentially ineligible to receive federal funds. Before this federal investigation, a state inspection days earlier substantiated some concerns. A complaint to the Georgia Department of Community Health alleged a patient died in the behavioral unit. No clinical staff members present for 7 hours prior to his death due to short staffing. There was fraudulent false documentation that every 15 minutes observations were being conducted. And in 2022, although marked for lack of sufficient evidence, a Southern Regional worker themselves wrote to the state, "I need someone to know about this unsafe hospital. Mental health patients running away. Ratios can be 1 to 8. There is never a night shift mental health nurse."
It was only a matter of time before something like this happened.
Fussell family attorney Jane Lamberti.
It's foreseeable. It was preventable.
Reacting to our findings.
What do they suggest about patient safety at Southern Regional Medical Center?
To me, what it suggests is that there is an awareness about the problem and it's not being taken care of.
Southern Regional would not interview with Atlanta News First Investigates about its security measures or patients reported missing, saying since this is an active legal matter, we have no information to provide at this time.
How you feeling?
The Fussell family now suing for nursing malpractice, negligence, wrongful death.
There are so many levels of the ball dropping in our son's situation that it's egregious.
When Darryl died,
We just couldn't overcome it.
so did the family restaurant where he used to work.
So we have not had the sign come down yet. And I don't know when that's going to happen. I guess we have to do that at some point.
The 23-year-old's remains now cremated into the necklace his mom wears, a golden bear she calls Boss Man. It was Darryl's nickname. As chance would have it, it was a nickname he would hear one last time before his death.
Hey, boss man, Riverdale PD, what's going on?
It's really such a heartbreaking story. You really just feel for that family. And they say in there that Darryl wanted help. It was why he was in the hospital in the first place. This is one of those projects, though, where we're kind of at the mercy of the hospital and figuring out what corrective actions they've taken. We know they're in good standing currently. They have submitted a corrective action plan to the government, but Southern Regional, as we said in the story, did not want to interview with us, so we don't know the details of that corrective action plan. As for the lawsuit, we know in court filings, the parent company of Southern Regional has denied any wrongdoing. Also named as a defendant in that lawsuit is Riverwoods Behavioral Health, and that is a facility which transferred Darryl to Southern Regional in the first place. They did give us a brief statement saying their deepest sympathies are with the Fussell family, but they value patient rights and patient privacy, so they won't be commenting further.
Sierra, first, hats off to you for checking, seeing something and sort of acting on it, seeing a trend in your inbox at work and saying, what's going on here? Then seeing that it's the same address and then Googling, Google Maps, what's that address? And it turns out it's a medical facility. That's a good indicator that maybe there's a story here. You've uncovered an institutional concern. but there's also a systemic one, isn't there? I know not only from your stories on this, Andy Parati's done several stories like this. In fact, he's working on another one right now. And it seems as though the common thread is that there are staffing issues, and we see it documented. Is that the problem, that there just aren't enough staff, and so people are able to walk by an empty desk at the front of the facility?
I mean, I think it's fair to deduce that, right? We haven't gotten the hospital on record saying, like, hey, we have a staffing problem. But what we can tell, what the federal and state records illustrate, that there likely is one. You saw in that story where the facility was under investigation for a patient who died in the psych area, and the inspector noted that a nurse, only one nurse on that entire unit, was working the shift that night. And then you saw in that story, that state investigation, there is allegation that seemed to be substantiated that some records may have been falsified, that they were actually checking on a patient every 15 minutes, but it turns out that no one was checking on that patient in that unit. At least the state investigation substantiated that. And really the most jarring complaint, which was later cited for lack of sufficient evidence, it does still paint a picture of some level of concern. It was a Southern Regional nurse themselves writing to the state, the Georgia Department of Community Health, the agency which oversees hospitals, writing, I need somebody to know about this facility. We are understaffed, and sometimes the ratios are 1-8, which is, from that nurse's perspective, dangerous. But like I said, we don't have the hospital on record. We are relying on these documents to illustrate the issue, and it seems very concerning, the staffing levels according to these complaints.
And these aren't just regular patients walking out the front door. We're talking about what are known in Georgia as 1013 patients. These are people who have essentially been committed, at least temporarily, to an institution because they're a danger to themselves or others, and it's a psychiatric hold. And so, in other words, these are not only the most dangerous, potentially, but also the most vulnerable patients in a facility. And we've talked about this with school shootings. There are always red flags. There are always warnings. In this case, a police officer or a family bringing a patient to a facility like this is raising that and waving that red flag, saying, look, something needs to be done. And then it turns out it's this porous, where they're just able to walk out the front door, literally.
Yeah, literally just walk out of the front door according to the records we've been able to obtain. But you mentioned that hold, an involuntary hold. So there is that inherent risk. Just think about it kind of logically here. If you feel you're being taken against your will, you're probably going to want to get away from that person or the agency that is holding you. And so if you have these patients that are on involuntary holds, there is that increased risk that they may try to escape, run away, leave the property. And the Fussell family, both the mom and dad, were so transparent in their conversation with me. It went on for about an hour, so we talked about a lot that wasn't included in this particular story. But they looked at it from a 360 perspective. They were saying, this also isn't just about our son. Imagine if our son was able to get to another floor of the hospital and harm someone else or do something that would affect the rest of the security of the hospital. So, they raised that point beyond their own child. And of course, they're looking at this from an aerial point of view, that if it could happen to them and their family and the dozens of patients we've talked about in the story, they hope that it doesn't have to happen in the future. The attorney in this story, we had a conversation with her, and she's with the Cochran firm, and she believes that security, while it might be complicated and you want to come up with your own security plans depending on what the facility calls for, whether it's a newsroom or a hospital, she makes the point that there are really inexpensive measures like a lockdown. And she feels that, and really that law firm that's suing, they feel something as simple, even if you had staffing issues, something as simple as, okay, someone has now escaped, they've left their assigned unit, let's lock the hospital down. She feels like that's inexpensive and could have saved a life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sierra Cummings, investigative reporter with Atlanta News First Investigates. You can see Sierra's story at atlantanewsfirst.com and just go to the Investigates page. You can also see her stories. This is a little secret we're going to let you in on behind the investigation. If you go to the byline on any one of our articles and click the name, you can see all of the stories at the bottom of the bio, which is really helpful. All the stories in reverse chronological order, which is helpful if you want to catch up on our reporting. In the meantime, this has been Atlanta News First Investigates Behind the Investigation. If you're watching this on Atlanta News First Plus streaming or YouTube, keep in mind you can also listen to this as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening to us, be sure to find us on YouTube and atlantanewsfirst.com. We'll see you next time.